In the village of Nkanu, the people lived simply. The land was fertile, the skies were clear, and the people's spirits were humble. But for Kenechukwu, the son of Mama Amara, this life was not enough. He was a restless soul, always dreaming of a life far grander than the one he had. While others were content, working their fields and gathering at the evening fire, Kenechukwu's mind was always elsewhere. Mama Amara, a woman of wisdom who had raised him alone after his father's early death, often noticed the far-off look in her son's eyes. Keen, she would call, her voice full of concern. Remember, the river that rushes too fast will forget its way. But Kenechukwu would only nod half-heartedly, his mind filled with thoughts of riches, wealth, and escape from the simple life they lived. One evening, after a long day of working in the fields, Kenechukwu sat with his mother beneath the great Iroko tree outside their home. The sky blazed with the colors of sunset, but Kenechukwu wasn't watching. His eyes were fixed on the distant horizon, imagining what lay beyond the hills. "You have grown silent these days, my son," Mama Amara said softly, her wrinkled hand resting on his shoulder. "Tell me, what troubles your heart?" Kenechukwu hesitated, the words on the tip of his tongue. "I want more, Mama," he finally admitted. "I'm tired of this life. Why should we toil in the fields when others live in mansions and have gold at their feet?" Mama Amara sighed deeply. She had feared this moment, the moment her son's ambitions would blind him to the values she had tried so hard to teach him. "A man who climbs a tree too quickly will find himself on weak branches," she said, her voice heavy with meaning. "Wealth is not the measure of a man's worth." But Kenechukwu was no longer listening. His mind was consumed by a desire that had taken root long ago. He wanted wealth, wealth that would lift him out of the dust and into a world where he commanded respect, power, and admiration. And the more his mother warned him, the more that desire grew. Little did he know that his wish was about to come true in the most twisted way possible. One evening, a visitor came to Nkanu. His name was Obiajulu, and his presence sent whispers through the village like a strong wind through the trees. He was dressed in robes finer than anything anyone had ever seen, and his skin glistened as though he had bathed in gold. But it wasn't just his appearance that captured the village's attention. It was the air of mystery that surrounded him. Some said he had traveled from distant lands, carrying with him riches and knowledge far beyond their imagination. Others whispered that his wealth was not of this world, that he had made deals with the spirits, the kind that no man should ever make. But Kenechukwu didn't care about the whispers. All he saw was the life he had always wanted standing before him. Obiajulu settled in the village for a time, staying in the finest house, the home of the village chief. It didn't take long for Kenechukwu to seek him out. Under the cover of night, Kenechukwu approached the grand house where Obiajulu was staying, his heart pounding with anticipation. He found Obiajulu seated alone, watching the flames of a small fire flicker in the darkness. Without hesitation, Kenechukwu knelt before him. "Teach me how to get what you have," he pleaded, his voice trembling. "I want wealth. I want power." Obiajulu's eyes flickered in the firelight, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Do you truly understand what you are asking for, boy?" His voice was deep, commanding, like the rumble of distant thunder. "I understand," Kenechukwu replied, his voice firm, despite the fear creeping up his spine. Obiajulu studied him for a long moment before finally speaking. "Wealth comes at a price. Are you willing to pay it?" Kenechukwu didn't hesitate. "Yes, anything." Obiajulu leaned in, his smile growing wider. "The price is simple, but it is heavy. You must bring me the heart of the one who loves you the most." Kenechukwu's breath caught in his throat. "The heart of my mother." Obiajulu said nothing, only watched as the weight of the words sank into Kenechukwu's soul. The young man's mind raced, torn between his love for his mother and his hunger for wealth. But in the end, the hunger won. Days passed after Kenechukwu's fateful meeting with Obiajulu, but he found no peace. His mind was plagued by a storm of thoughts, each one darker than the last. The weight of the decision lay heavily on his chest, pressing down on him until he could hardly breathe. Every time he looked at his mother, her kind face and gentle smile only deepened his torment. Mama Amara, unaware of the darkness growing in her son's heart, continued to shower him with love and care. "Keen, my son," she would say, "even the tallest tree remembers its roots." But her words, once filled with wisdom and comfort, now sounded like chains, binding him to a life of poverty and obscurity. One night, as Kenechukwu lay in bed, unable to sleep, he made his choice. "I will do it," he whispered into the darkness. The weight of his decision settled over him like a heavy cloak, but his resolve was unwavering. He had made a pact, and there was no turning back. The next day, Kenechukwu avoided his mother's gaze. He could not bear to look into her eyes, knowing what he planned to do. Every moment spent in her presence was a reminder of the betrayal he was about to commit. But the image of Obiajulu's wealth filled his mind, driving him forward. That evening, as the sun began to set and the village quieted down, Kenechukwu prepared himself. He gathered what he needed for the ritual Obiajulu had described, his hands trembling as he worked. The night was dark, the sky heavy with clouds, as if the heavens themselves were mourning what was about to happen. Kenechukwu stood outside his mother's hut, the cool night air chilling his skin. His heart pounded in his chest as he took one last deep breath. "A man who climbs a mountain without fear will see the world," he whispered to himself, trying to summon the courage to carry out his plan. With trembling hands, he entered his mother's hut. Inside the hut, the air was thick with the scent of burning wood, and the soft glow of the fire cast long shadows on the walls. Mama Amara lay peacefully on her mat, her breathing slow and steady. She had no idea that her son, the boy she had raised with love and sacrifice, stood over her with darkness in his heart. Kenechukwu's hands shook as he pulled out the tools for the ritual, his mind racing with thoughts of wealth and power. But beneath those thoughts, a voice whispered, warning him, pleading with him to stop. "A goat that doesn't listen to its mother's call will end up in the lion's belly," the voice said, echoing one of the proverbs Mama Amara had often shared. But it was too late for second thoughts. As he began the ritual, tears streamed down his face. Mama Amara stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly. Kenechukwu hesitated, the weight of his actions nearly crushing him. But Obiajulu's words came back to him, cold and sharp. "Bring me the heart of the one who loves you the most." With a final trembling breath, Kenechukwu completed the ritual. Mama Amara's final breath escaped her lips in a soft whisper, and as her life slipped away, Kenechukwu's heart shattered. The deed was done. Kenechukwu stood over his mother's lifeless body, his hands stained with the blood of his betrayal. His chest heaved with silent sobs, the weight of what he had done crushing him. But it was done. There was no going back. Outside, the wind howled through the village, as if the ancestors themselves were mourning Mama Amara's death. The night seemed darker, colder, and Kenechukwu felt the emptiness creep into his soul. But even in the midst of his grief, one thought remained. The wealth, the power, it was his now. Obiajulu's promise would soon come to pass. The morning after Mama Amara's death, Kenechukwu awoke to a silence so deep it chilled him to the bone. The village was still, the usual sounds of daily life muted, as if the very air knew what he had done. But Kenechukwu forced the guilt down. The price had been paid. Now all that remained was to collect his reward. He left his hut, his steps slow and heavy, his mind still reeling from the previous night's events. As he walked through the village, the people gave him curious looks, but no one said a word. Kenechukwu had always been quiet, reserved, and now Kenechukwu made his way to Obiajulu's house, his hands still trembling from the weight of his actions. When he arrived, Obiajulu was waiting for him, seated on the grand chair outside the chief's hut. The mysterious man's eyes glinted with satisfaction as he saw Kenechukwu approach. "Is it done?" Obiajulu asked, his voice calm but filled with dark expectation. Kenechukwu nodded, unable to speak. The guilt in his heart was overwhelming, but the thought of the wealth that awaited him pushed him forward. Obiajulu rose slowly, circling Kenechukwu as if inspecting him. "You have paid the price," Obiajulu said, his voice smooth like silk. "But know this, boy. Wealth is a burden, not a blessing. You have taken the heart of the one who loved you the most. The spirits will give you what you desire, but be careful what you wish for." Obiajulu handed Kenechukwu a small pouch. It was heavy in his palm, and Kenechukwu's heart raced with anticipation. "Inside this pouch," Obiajulu said, "is the wealth you seek. But remember, the more you gain, the more you lose." Kenechukwu clutched the pouch, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't understand Obiajulu's warning, but he didn't care. He had what he wanted. With shaking hands, he opened the pouch. Inside were gold coins, more than he had ever seen in his life. The sight of them made his heart race, and for a moment the guilt faded. He had done it. He had achieved the wealth he had always dreamed of. He turned to thank Obiajulu, but the man was already gone, disappearing into the shadows like a wisp of smoke. At first, life seemed perfect. Kenechukwu was now the richest man in Nkanu. He built a grand house, wore fine clothes, and people from all over the village came to marvel at his newfound fortune. They whispered about his wealth, about how he had risen from poverty to riches overnight. But they didn't know the truth. Kenechukwu tried to ignore the gnawing emptiness inside him. But as the days passed, strange things began to happen. His wealth grew and grew, but so did his loneliness. The people who once cared for him now kept their distance. Even the children, who used to play outside his house, avoided him as if he carried a disease. At night, Kenechukwu couldn't sleep. He was haunted by dreams of his mother, her eyes filled with sorrow as she watched him from the shadows. He heard her voice in the wind, whispering the proverbs she had once shared with him. The child who sells his mother's love for gold will find his wealth empty. The more Kenechukwu gained, the more he lost. His heart grew colder, and soon, even the gold that filled his house felt like a burden. He couldn't escape the feeling that something was terribly wrong. No matter how much he tried to forget, the image of his mother's lifeless body haunted him. One day, a terrible storm swept through Nkanu. The skies darkened, and the wind howled like 1,000 angry spirits. As the storm raged outside, Kenechukwu sat alone in his grand house, staring at the pile of gold that no longer brought him joy. He was a rich man, but he had never felt poorer in his life. Suddenly, a voice called out from the shadows. Kenechukwu. He jumped, his heart pounding as he recognized the voice. It was his mother's voice, soft, gentle, but filled with sorrow. "You took my heart for gold," Mama Amara's voice whispered. "But gold cannot buy love. It cannot buy peace." Kenechukwu fell to his knees, sobbing. "I was wrong, Mama. I was blinded by greed. I thought wealth would make me happy, but I was wrong." The wind howled louder, rattling the windows, as if the spirits themselves were angry. Kenechukwu felt the weight of his actions crush him. He had sacrificed the one person who had truly loved him, and now he was left with nothing but emptiness. In the dead of night, Obiajulu appeared once more, his shadow looming over Kenechukwu as he knelt in despair. "I warned you," Obiajulu said, his voice cold and unforgiving. "Wealth comes at a price. You took the heart of the one who loved you most, and now you are cursed to live without love." Kenechukwu looked up at him, tears streaming down his face. "Please, take the gold back. I don't want it anymore." But Obiajulu shook his head. "The price has been paid. You must live with the consequences of your actions." With that, Obiajulu disappeared into the night, leaving Kenechukwu alone in the darkness. The storm raged on outside, but inside Kenechukwu felt only the cold emptiness of his heart. Kenechukwu remained in his grand house, surrounded by wealth, but no amount of gold could fill the void in his heart. He realized too late that true wealth is not measured by coins or material possessions, but by the love and relationships we build. The people of Nkanu, too, learned a lesson from Kenechukwu's fate. They saw that greed, when unchecked, could lead even the best of men to ruin. A man who chases after gold will find his hands full, but his heart empty, the elders would say, and the village children would listen, wide-eyed with understanding. And so, Kenechukwu's story became a warning to all who heard it, a reminder that wealth gained at the cost of love is no wealth at all. The spirits had claimed their price, and Kenechukwu was left to live out his days in a house full of gold, but devoid of the one thing that mattered most. Moral lesson: greed blinds the heart and can lead to decisions that bring no peace. Wealth is meaningless without love, family, and inner peace. As the African proverb says, a man with too much wealth and no heart is as empty as a hollow tree. If you enjoyed this story and learned something valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the wisdom. There's more where this came from at Wholistic Folktale, where we bring you stories filled with African culture, morals, and thought-provoking lessons. Thank you for watching.